Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. My guest today is Richard Freeman. Richard is a cryptozoologist, author, zoological journalist, and web TV presenter. Can we please welcome Richard to the show? Hello there.
Hi Bob, thanks for having me.
No problem at all. I'll enjoy this tonight as well. What inspired you to write In Search of Real Monsters? And how did it grow out of your earlier work in cryptozoology?
Well, it's only one of a whole host of books I've written. That particular one is part two of a two-volume work that was published by a now defunct American company called Mango. And they approached me to write this book on cryptozoology, and it was so long they wanted to split it into two. So that ended up as the second half of the book.
All right. Could you share a story of your first monster hunt that made you believe cryptozoologists deserve serious study?
Well, my first big serious monster hunt was in Thailand in 2000. I mean, I'd gone looking for British big cats before then, but it was in Thailand to the Mekong River where people had seen these enormous snakes. They call them nagas, and they're part of the Indo-Chinese folklore, and they're supposed to be these huge dragon-like snakes with fins on their heads that are associated with water and rainfall. And I spoke to a lot of people that had seen them, these monstrous snakes. There was an abbot of a monastery. Him and his monks had seen one in the ruins of an old monastery, coiled up um, in the cellars underneath it, and they prayed for it to leave, and it finally did because it would try and attack anybody that went in there. Then I met a chief of police, the water police in the Mekong River, and he'd seen this huge snake swimming upstream through the river. He thought it was debris in the water until he saw that it was going upstream and it was moving from side to side. And perhaps the most interesting was this old man who'd stumbled on these caves and started to explore these caves that no one had found before. And he took me down there, and I believe I was the first Westerner ever to go into these caves.
Oh
And there
my
was this
God.
labyrinth of caves in the jungle that only this old guy had been into. And he was exploring by candlelight, and he saw one of these things in an underground river slithering along, and it was enormous, about 60 feet long. And
Oh,
sort of
bloody hell.
that was the
That must
first
have been frightening.
that was the first one I did. And since then I've been yeah, I didn't see it myself, but the old guide saw it. He took me to this underground river where he'd seen it. But since then, I've been on the track of the orang pendek in Sumatra 6 times, the Tasmanian wolf down in Tasmania 3 times, the Russian Almasty, the wild man of Russia twice, the Yeti in the Garo Hills in northern India, the Caspian tiger in Tajikistan, the Ninkananka, dragon-like creature of the swamps of West Africa, giant
Oh, God.
anaconda in Guyana in South America, most recently giant crocodiles in India.
Oh, my God. How does the book differ from previous writing on cryptozoology? I think you're frozen.
You cut out there, Bob. I didn't hear what the question was.
Yeah. Oh, how does the book differ from your previous writing on cryptozoology?
Well, both of the volumes of that book are sort of an introduction to cryptozoology, and then I write about my own experiences. My other books have been more focusing on one area. I wrote a book on Japanese monsters once, Japanese ghosts and monsters folklore called the Great Yokai Encyclopedia. Then I've written a couple of books on dragons and modern day dragon sightings, of which there are a surprising amount, which is something that absolutely fascinates me. And I wrote a book on the orang pendek, but this one was more of a generalist book, about the subject as a whole, and also how to get involved, how to set up a cryptozoological expedition if that's what you wanted to do from scratch.
Well, yeah, that was one of my questions. Which expedition or cryptid described in the book was the most surprising, and why? Examples include the orange pendak in Sumatra or the Thycine in Tasmania.
Well, the orang pendek of Sumatra and the thylacine or Tasmanian wolf are probably the two most likely to exist. The orang pendek is a upright walking ape seen in the jungles of Sumatra. It's about 3 to 4 feet tall, but very bulky with long hair, and it lives on the forest floor and it walks erect. And lots of people have seen it ever since the time of the Dutch colonists, including Debbie Marta, who used to be the head of the Indonesian tiger conservation group, and also a wildlife photographer saw the creature as well. um, I've been over there 6 times now. I've heard it calling. I've found its footprints and its handprints. I've found hair, and the hair was analysed by a biologist called Lars Thomas from Denmark, who's an expert in mammal hair.
Oh, yeah.
They couldn't get DNA out of it, but the structure of it, he said, was similar to the Sumatran orangutan, but distinct from it. So he thinks it's a relative of the Sumatran orangutan, but it's not the Sumatran orangutan. It's something new. So that's one very likely to exist. The last time I was there, I was about 20 foot away from one, behind a stand of bamboo, hearing it calling. And my friend went round the bamboo, trying to frighten it towards me so I could get it on camera, but it just dashed off at an angle and I missed seeing it, which was incredibly frustrating. Then the Tasmanian wolf, or thylacine, that's a flesh-eating marsupial, and it looks like a wolf or a dog, but it has these tiger-like stripes down its back, but it's a marsupial. It's related to the Tasmanian devil and things like that. And
Do you think it's still alive?
Yes, it was supposed to have been hunted into extinction in the 1930s, but since then, over 4,000 people, a park ranger, Tasmania, 3 times now, and the forests in the west of the island are impenetrable, thick forests and mountains. And the island itself, Tasmania, is about the size of Ireland, the country of Ireland, but there's less than 500,000 people living there, mainly in Launceston and what's the second city called? I've forgotten. And Hobart. Hobart's the main city, and Launceston is the second city. Most of the people live there, and then the towns. The towns and villages are very, very small. And then when you get out to the west of the island, it's just wilderness. And there are reports of this thing on New Guinea as well, in the jungles of New Guinea. It's an example of convergent evolution, where two completely unrelated animals, often on other sides of the world, evolve to look like each other because they're fulfilling the same ecological niche. Another example would be pythons and boas, the big constricting snakes. Pythons and boas are not closely related to each other, but they look alike because they're doing something similar in different parts of the world. Same with the vultures. Vultures you get in Asia and Africa and southern parts of Europe are not related closely at all to the vultures you get in South America and Central America and North America. The ones in the Americas are more closely related to storks, and the ones in the old world are more closely related to birds of prey, but they look alike because they're having similar lifestyles. It's the same with the Tasmanian wolf. It looks like a wolf because it's doing something similar. And I've spoken to people over there that have seen it. They've got no axe to grind. They're not trying to get anything out of it. I've been shown footprints that match up with known footprints of the animal. And once I was over there and I got this very pungent smell that smelt like a hyena when I was in a remote area on a little path into the forest. And it was as if something had just crossed a few minutes before and left this smell. And all the old bushmen in the 19th century who had been
Yeah.
in the Boer War from Australia were familiar with hyenas. They said the Tasmanian wolf smelt like a hyena. And some of them used to call it the hyena. It had a similar smell. And this was a hyena-like smell that I smelled in Tasmania.
Hmm. Very interesting. And right, where I've got to. All right, I know it. You write the book about creatures like the Mongolian death worm, is it?
Yeah.
What's the most compelling evidence you have encountered?
For the death worm, well, the death worm is this burrowing creature that lives in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, and it's supposed to come to the surface after rainfall. And it's shaped like a salami or a draft excluder. It's about 3 feet long, um, reddy brown and scaly, and it's difficult to tell which end is the head and which end is the tail. And according to folklore, it can spit a corrosive yellow saliva that acts like acid, and it can generate blasts of electricity like an electric eel. So I went over to the Gobi Desert and led an expedition there, and we went for about 1,000 miles through the Gobi, talking to various people that had seen this creature. And they say that the electricity, they call it throwing lightning, they say that that's apocryphal. It's just folklore. It doesn't do that. But they think it's poisonous. It's venomous rather, and they're very, very frightened of it. And we talked to about 2 dozen witnesses, including an old man that had seen it back in the 1930s, and he'd been out tending goats and camels, and he saw this
Yeah.
thing in the desert and came back and told his parents, and his parents rounded up the animals, packed up their gur, which is the circular um, tents made out of fur, moved out of the area. A sighting of a death worm can throw a whole area into a panic. And then the most recent one was a guy who'd seen it just the year before in an oasis in Mongolia, and all of them were talking about this strange creature. We met a retired army colonel who said back in the 70s, because they had this base near the borders of China, and he said he was on patrol and he saw what he thought was a bit of a old tire lying in the desert. And as he got closer, he saw it was the death worm, and it come up just at sunrise to bask in the sun. And he said it got dew on its scales, and the sunlight was making it sparkle. And he thinks that's where the idea of the electricity comes from. But on another occasion, he said one of his soldiers had found one, had seen one in a place where they stored food, but by the time he got there, it left. And we talked to a guy that's seen one come out of a hole and grab a mouse, kill a mouse, eat a mouse. It's probably some sort of reptile rather than a worm. There are a group of reptiles called amphisbaenas, or worm lizards, and they're not lizards and they're not snakes. They're in a little group of their own, and they're these sausage-shaped reptiles that burrow under the ground. And we think that the death worm might be a very large undiscovered specimen of one of those, or maybe a sand boa, an undiscovered species of sand boa, which are these chunky snakes that live in
Right.
arid areas. But whatever it is, it's unknown to science.
Right. What does a typical cryptozoology expedition look like from planning to execution?
How long's a piece of string? Because
Ah,
they're all different.
I
They're all
bet they are.
different places. So the main thing, the key to it, is to get a good native guide who can speak good English,
Yeah.
and that person can go and find out where the witnesses are, where the latest sightings have been, and they can also organise things like food and cooks and transportation. That's the key. That's the key
How
to
many, usually on an expedition, how many is the of you?
it. Can vary. It can vary from just a couple to 2 or 3 to as many as 8. I try to keep it fairly small. I mean, there's this next one we're going on. There's going to be about 6 people on it. Usually, it's 3 or 4.
How do you decide which cryptic or region to investigate next?
Well, most of the time we don't get any funding. It comes all out of our pockets. So, oh, is that your phone going?
Yeah, I'm not answering it.
So what we do is, first of all, you've got to choose what cryptid you're going after, and it's got to be one that's got a good likelihood of existing. You
Yeah.
wouldn't get me spending my money going after the chupacabra, for example, because I think it's a media creation. I don't think there's a real animal behind it. It's got to be something that's been seen regular and recently, so not something that was only seen a couple of times 150 years ago, and something that's likely to exist. It's existing in a place that can support it. So, like the Yeti, it's existing in the mountain forests of Asia. It's been reported for hundreds of years. It's regularly reported. It's probably going to be an actual creature. There's probably going to be something behind it.
Yeah.
And then you've got to look into the area you're going. How difficult is it going to be to get there and get across the terrain? How expensive is it going to be? And I mean, I've done a couple of expeditions to Russia to look for the Almasty, the Russian wild man. And but now, because of the current political situation, I wouldn't go back. I want to go to Siberia to look for the monsters that are supposed to be living in these lakes in remote areas of Siberia. There's a lake called Lake Chany, where some serpentine 30-foot long animal, local people living around it say it's killed about 14 people by ramming boats, knocking them into the water and then grabbing them. And no one has done a proper investigation into what the hell that is. And I wanted to go after that with underwater cameras and bait, and I thought it could be a gigantic eel. But I still want to go over there, but whilst Putin and his cronies are in power, I still don't think it's going to happen.
You got to be careful, haven't you?
Yeah. There was a Spanish cryptozoologist who was in Afghanistan looking at the wild man in Afghanistan, which was similar to the Almasty in Russia, and he was murdered while he was over there. They reckon that the Taliban had killed him.
Oh my God. Yeah, you've got to be careful where you go and what you do, and investigate it first and look at where you're going. Have you ever experienced?
I've been stalked by a tiger in Sumatra.
Yeah.
Attacked by a cobra in West Africa. I've been caught up in a tornado in the Mongolian desert. I've been covered in ticks, covered in mosquitoes.
Oh my God!
But I've
covered in ticks.
I've
that
never
must be
been. Yeah, that was in the Gobi. But I've never been afraid of the creatures that I've been looking for. It's the bureaucracy that is the main problem. Bureaucracy is the big in a lot of areas.
Yeah,
getting into places. I mean, I've just been to India. I've just been to India looking for giant crocodiles, and I filmed this absolutely enormous crocodile in Beta Tanaka National Park in Odisha in the north of India, near to the coast. Monstrous saltwater crocodile, about 24 foot long, probably the biggest in India. I mean, there are probably bigger ones in Australia.
They are big at that,
but probably the biggest.
Size. 24
yeah, absolutely
long.
Huge. Yeah, and probably about 2 tons. But the getting a visa to India is a nightmare because it's a long. You've got to go onto this website, and you have to go fill in page after page after page of stuff and questions, and in terms of not, and it because it's an old decrepit website, it just keeps crashing before you get to the end. I must have tried it about a dozen times and got really frustrated, and then had to get my friend to do it for me on his computer. So it's stuff like that, and flight delays, and
Oh my God,
petty
yeah.
bureaucracy, and fraud.
Right, it must be
That is
difficult.
the thing. Not being attacked by monsters. Yeah.
Delays and everything. Have you ever experienced a moment when science and local folklore clashed? And how did you handle it?
It depends what you mean by clash.
Um, well, I presume you're looking at something, a strange animal, and somebody's saying it's something else.
Well, mostly um, the people we speak to, the nomads and the tribesmen, they've usually seen the creatures themselves. Like the people we spoke to in the Garo Hills in northern India, a lot of the hill tribes had seen the Yeti. They call it Mande Barung. That's their name for it, the forest
All right.
man. And we saw the tracks of it in the jungle. And they were all talking about an animal with black fur that stood about 10 feet tall and looked like a gorilla, but standing up on its hind legs. We talked to even chiefs, tribal chiefs who had seen it. The nomads in the Gobi that had seen the death worm, they were all, convinced it was an animal, not some sort of phantom or demon or something. But they also, a lot of the nomads we spoke to said they'd seen dragons as well, and that's something different because the death worm to them is an animal. It's a flesh and blood animal, whereas the dragon is something more paranormal. They say they associate it with rain, and they said it comes down from the mountains and the heavens after rainfall, and it brings
Right.
the rain with it in clouds. And it comes up out of they were seen coming up out of wells as well. And in one place, a travelling doctor, had seen one coiled up in a well, and he said it had this head like a horse or a camel, a great serpentine body. But
Probably. Well, when you look at um, thousands of years ago, there were lots of strange animals around then.
yeah,
Do you think
yeah,
they're still around to this day? Probably.
there are. And if you're using painting with very thick strokes, monsters fall into two categories. The first category are unknown animals, and that's things like the Yeti and the Mongolian deathworm and sea serpents, which are we just don't know what they are. We can guess what they're related to, but they're unknown to science. Then you've got things like the Tasmanian wolf and things like the pink-headed duck, which are supposed to be extinct, but people still see them, so they're probably still around in remote areas. They're not extinct; they're just rare and they live in remote areas. And then you get things like giant anacondas, giant pythons, giant crocodiles, known animals that have grown really big. That's one category. The second category are paranormal monsters, things that are not flesh and blood in the way that we understand them, and that includes things like Mothman, Owlman, fairies, modern day sightings of fairies, and modern day sightings of dragons, which is something which really interests me. And there's a lot of modern day sightings of dragons, and the dragon legend goes back at least 75,000 years. There are rock paintings of them in South Africa, 75,000 years old, and they appear in every culture on Earth. And I investigated a sighting from 2023 at Waverley Abbey in Surrey, and there were 10 people, and they'd gone out there ghost hunting because it's supposed to be haunted, the ruins of this abbey. And they
Yeah.
were there about 9 o'clock at night, and this one lady looked over at some woods, and she saw this immense animal, which she said had bat-like wings and a huge wingspan of at least 10 meters, flying above these trees, and it banked round and dived down into the trees. And she was the only one that saw it, and she was terrified. But before she could tell the others, two more smaller ones came out of this other wood and flew over the ruins of the abbey. And these had a wingspan of about 10 feet. And one of them landed and squatted on the ruins of the abbey. And they said they saw it had a long neck and long head and a long tail with an arrowhead at the end. Some people said they thought they saw legs underneath it, but the wings were bat-like. They weren't feathery, they were bat-like. And another one of these things landed in a yew tree. And I interviewed 5 of the 10 people that had seen these things, and none of them were exaggerating. They just told you what they saw.
Yeah.
The ladies, though, the two women were really frightened. They thought that these things could tear them to shreds. And they said, the witnesses said that they looked black until you shone a torchlight on them, and they were like silvery colour. The scales were a silvery colour, and then they eventually flew off again. But they were adamant that these things weren't herons or swans or geese. They had wings like, they said the wings were like the wings of a fruit bat, but bigger.
Right.
That's just, I've actually been there several times now, and I've had weird things happen to me there. I've heard like what sounds like disembodied voices of children laughing and stuff. And
Oh, yeah.
I saw a golden orb with a tail like a meteor flash past my face, and it wasn't a firefly because it was the wrong time of the year, and I've seen dozens of fireflies. And I also saw like this shapeless mass that seemed to be hanging in midair over some woods about a quarter of a mile away, and it dropped down into the woods. And afterwards there was this weird sort of moaning, screeching sound, which was unlike any animal I've ever heard before, wild or domestic. And I used to be a zookeeper, so what's going on there I don't know, but it seems to be like a window area. Ghosts are seen there as well. The people that saw the dragon, they said on that night, as they were walking up to the abbey, they saw these weird lights in the sky, these weird spheres, sort of white spheres that were like hanging in the sky, and then they shot off. So it's lots of phenomena in one area, and that's what we call a window area.
Yeah. Did you find any strange animals around churches?
I didn't see any around the abbey, but that's where these dragons were seen. The Owlman of Morn Smith, which is similar to the Mothman, but it's more bird-like. A friend of mine saw that thing, and when he was about 14, and it still frightens him today, and he's in his 50s, and he's now a very well-respected scientist. But that has always been seen in the vicinity of Morn Old Church in Cornwall.
Do you think mainstream science will ever take cryptozoology serious, and what would it take?
Well, some mainstream scientists are taking cryptozoology serious. The late Jeff Meldrum was an expert in the evolution of bipedalism and the evolution of feet. He's an expert on animals' feet and how they become bipeds. And he was very interested in Sasquatch, Bigfoot. He was convinced it existed. And the late Dr. Grover Krantz, he was a biologist that was interested in Bigfoot. And several American and Canadian scientists have been interested in Bigfoot. In Russia, well, in the former Soviet Union, there was actually a commission to look for the Russian wild man, the Almasty. And it was headed up by a guy called Boris Prozhnev, who was a Russian scientist and polymath. And there was another guy called Peter Smolin, who's the head of the Darwin Museum in Moscow, and a captain in World War II, and she'd actually been sent to a gulag at one point, but she spent her life looking for the Russian wild man, and they had this government-backed commission in the 50s to look for it. And even after the government backing was withdrawn, the commission went on, and its headquarters was the Darwin Museum in Moscow. And they went on for years and years looking for the Russian wild man. So there were scientists that took it seriously.
Looking into it,
I
yeah.
think what's got to happen is we've got to find a type specimen. We've got to prove one of these things exists. As soon as we get a type specimen, I think then it'll be less controversial.
I'm going to say because I think it's in Washington State, in the States, you're not allowed to shoot a Sasquatch.
Yeah, they're quite rightly they're protected. But if I were to, manage, I don't want to kill anything. I'd like to get good DNA evidence for one of these things. And if that one of the smaller animals, like the death worm, which is only about 3 feet long, if I could catch one and bring it back to, say, Ulaanbaatar, or if we could find the bones of one of these creatures, then that's job done. I mean, I
think a lot of people have said that. Why don't we find bones of Sasquatch?
Well, particularly in forest areas, bones don't last long. A carcass won't last long. A carcass will be eaten very quickly by scavengers, and even the bones are eaten by rodents for the calcium in them. So they're only there for a few weeks. And people have asked hunters how many times have they seen the carcass of a bear or a puma that they didn't shoot themselves, and almost never.
No, never. Yeah, that's true. What's the difference between a cryptid and an undiscovered species from a scientific standpoint?
Nothing really, it's just semantics. A cryptid, by its definition, if we're following strict cryptozoological rules, is an animal that is unknown to science, or one that's thought to be extinct but might still be around. So there's no real difference. The difference is that the paranormal ones, which aren't really cryptozoology. Cryptozoology is just the flesh and blood ones. The paranormal ones are a whole different kettle of fish. Whether these are that's something that's coming through from another dimension, another plane of existence, or whether they're some sort of gestalt collective thought form from the subconscious of mankind, we just don't know at the minute. But a true cryptid and an unknown animal, they're the same thing by definition. And a cryptid doesn't have to be big and scary. It doesn't have to be a sea serpent or a yeti or something like that.
No.
It can be something like the pink-headed duck from Burma, which is supposed to have been extinct since the 1950s, but people still report them from remote areas in Burma. Or the great ivory-billed woodpecker, which is supposed to have been extinct since the 1930s, but people still occasionally see them in the southeast United States.
Yeah, what about werewolves? People keep seeing these werewolves. We've had sightings at Benton.
Now, the interesting thing about these is that they're totally different from the werewolves that come from European folklore, the ones that were seen in medieval times. Because, like, in medieval times, a werewolf was somebody that transformed entirely into a wolf. So the thing that they transform into looks like any other wolf, the only difference being perhaps weird behavior. And usually they would have a belt or a coat of wolf skin that they put on that would make them transform, and they say that it was given to them by a sorcerer or the devil or something like that. Or sometimes there'd be a curse. And very rarely was it thought that if they bit someone else, they would become a werewolf. They would just change into this wolf that would go out and kill people and livestock. And maybe the original werewolf stories started with rabies, because a rabid wolf will have no fear of humans and it will attack them and it will attack livestock. So maybe that's where the original idea comes from. The things that are seen today are more like the Hollywood werewolf, in that they stand up on two legs and they have this hair-covered humanoid body and a wolf's head. And I think that is because that's what most people today think what a werewolf should look like, because of the influence of film. It's not what they look like in actual medieval legend. So I think it's something to do with what we're expecting them to look like, is what they manifest as. And the things that are seen up at Bempton and the things that are seen in Wisconsin and other areas in the USA, I think there's something supernatural. And do you remember the case of the Hexham heads, the two
Oh,
stone
yeah.
heads that, that seem to have a phantom werewolf that manifested wherever they were taken. Yeah, so it's something paranormal, like the dragons and like the fairies and things like that.
That's true. What's the most common misunderstanding you encounter about cryptozoology?
The most common and the most irritating misconception is that the Yeti is white. The Yeti is not white. It's black or brown or sort of reddish colour like an orangutan, but never white. It comes from a mistranslation of one of the local names for it, because across Asia, the Yeti has got dozens of different names in different areas. And there's a Sino-Tibetan name for it called Nitokangme, which translates as abominable man of the rocks. And it was mistranslated way back when, in the 1920s, as abominable man of the snows. So we
Oh,
think of
right.
it in the snow and having white fur like a polar bear. It doesn't. The Yeti doesn't live above the snow line. There's nothing there for it to eat. It lives in the forests. That's where you're going to find it. If you go looking for it, you have to look in the forests because it's not going to live up where there's no food.
That's true. So why have they always got it climbing up these
It's
mountains?
mainly because well, it does live in mountains, but it lives where the forests are. It doesn't live
No way
right
down.
up, yeah, where the snow is. It's probably because of the Shipton photographs of the alleged Yeti footprints in the snow from the 1950s that were the famous one where they've got the ice axe next to it. That is probably a footprint of a known animal, and it's melted in the sun and then frozen again, and then melted and frozen again. So it's got this
Big.
foot-like shape. So it's probably not actually the tracks of the Yeti. The only time the Yeti would go across the snow is if it's moving from valley to valley. It wouldn't live up there.
Yeah. How do you respond to skeptics who say cryptids are purely mythological or misidentified animals?
I say to them, go into the jungles of Sumatra or the mountains of the Himalayas or the outback of Tasmania or the jungles of South America, and then tell me that they're mythological. Talk to the native people that have seen them, who have better things to do, like surviving, than making up stories for Westerners. All these skeptics, not a one of them goes out and does the things that I do. Not a one of them. They will sit at their computers saying, "Oh, this can't possibly exist," because I'd have known about it. We, modern science would have known about it. It can't exist. I say so, so it doesn't exist.
Yeah, you're right there, Richard. I think a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm a cryptozoology," but they never go out anywhere.
Hmm. I mean, there's a skeptic on a forum that I go on, and I was once talking about the Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot film and why I was saying this isn't a man in a suit because the physical anatomy of it, it couldn't be a man in a suit.
Mm.
I said, look, I've worked with apes. I've worked extensively with great apes. And this skeptic said, she said, oh, well, it doesn't matter that you've worked with apes. And I said, that's the most stupid thing you've ever said. And that's
Yeah.
up against some stiff competition. Would you say to an architect that their opinion on the structure of a building didn't matter if they were an architect? It's insanity. The thing in the Patterson film isn't a man, because if you look at its head, you'll see it's got a thick brow ridge, and then the forehead isn't upright like a human forehead. If you look at it side on, it's got this sloping forehead
Mm.
like an ape or a primitive relative of man, a hominid. So if you were going to get a, a mask that looked like that, it'd have to be big enough to fit over the human forehead, so it'd be too big, and, and it isn't. If you look at all the old films where they have guys in gorilla suits, in the old Tarzan films and stuff, the
Yeah.
old B movies, the head always looks too big for the body because they've got to make it fit onto a human head with the high forehead, whereas an ape's forehead slopes. And this thing has a sloping forehead, but the head isn't too big for the body. Also, the arms are much longer than human arms in comparison to the legs.
Yeah.
The arms are about 70% the length of the legs, so they're much longer than human arms. And if you were going to have, if you were holding a false hand to make your arm look longer, that would make the forearm look too long, and it doesn't. All the anatomy of that suggests that it's not a man in a suit.
Yeah, I've watched it and watched it and watched it. And I don't think it's a man in a suit. No way.
Most of the other alleged films of Bigfoot are either too blurry to be much use, or they're clearly somebody flailing around in a suit, in a monkey suit. There are
Oh,
a couple that look like they could be something, but it's the Patterson Gimlin film, that's the best.
I think it is as well, Richard. Have you ever had to question your own assumptions after collecting new data in the field?
Yes, yes. I always thought, before I went out to look for the orang pendek, I always thought that it was a robust ground dwelling relative of the gibbons. And after listening to the eyewitness accounts and after getting the hair and the hair analysis from Lars Thomas, I changed my mind, and I think it's a relative of the orangutans.
All right. You do?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's nice, but you can come out and say that.
Mm.
You know, we all question sometimes and think, oh, I don't know about that. Was it that or was it something else? Ooh. What's the most personal, meaningful outcome of your monster hunting career?
What's been the most what? Sorry.
Personal, meaningfully outcome of your monster hunting career?
Oh goodness, that's a good question. The orang pendek hair was really important. Um, Meeting so many good people around the world, so good,
Yeah.
honest people, particularly some of the guides.
Well, like-minded people.
Yeah, and honest people like tribes people who, well, one of the times we went to Sumatra, we got about 20 odd people came to talk to us, and some of them had come miles because they'd seen the orang pendek, and we sat around talking to them all. These people didn't get anything out of this. In fact, they had to take a day out and walk and come for miles to talk to us, to tell us their stories. And if they'd have been just making stuff up, then they'd have no reason to do this.
Mm.
And they were all describing something exactly alike. Some of them had seen the footprints, and some of them had seen the creature.
So it's been regular for them people to see that all the time then.
Yeah, well, not all the time, but they see it in the jungle. We had a guide called Sahar Dimas. He's sadly passed away now, but he lived in the jungle for 14 years and he saw it once. And that
Oh,
was on one of our expeditions. He saw it, yeah.
How has the life of exploration changed your view of natural world?
Well, it's made me realise that there is a false notion that the world has all been explored and mapped, and that's simply not true. Even in the days of satellite imagery, The satellite can't see through the canopy of a jungle or a forest. It can't see into caves. It can't see under the seas or deep lakes. So this idea that the world has all been mapped and explored is nonsense. Some of the natives we speak to say they've never been to the places we're going to. When we were in Sumatra the second time, we were trying to get into this very remote valley. We called it the Lost Valley, and no one had been down there. We found one old man who had been down there in his youth, and he told us how to get there and went with us. But nobody else had ever been down there. So there are places where no man has ever trod. And I've been into some of these remote places like this valley, certain oases in the Gobi Desert, and I've been the caves in Thailand. I've been the first European ever to set foot on them.
That must be amazing to go to a place where no human has ever been.
Yeah, it is. And these places still exist.
Do you get frightened sometimes when you go into a place like that? Are you prepared mentally?
Well, when I was down these caves in Thailand, some of them we were having to crawl on our bellies and stuff, and I couldn't do it now. I'm too fat. And I thought, well, there was myself and this other Thai chap called Pang, and there was this old man called Mr. Pimper. He reminded me a bit of Albert Steptoe from Steptoe and Son.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, yeah. And I thought, God, if this old bloke dies down here, now we're done for. We'll never find our way back out again.
Oh, God, yeah. That must be
Like I say,
difficult.
yeah, I've never been frightened of the monsters, the creatures. I've never been frightened of those. I mean, when we were in the middle of a tornado in the Gobi Desert, it actually came roaring out of the desert near this oasis and straight to our camp, and it destroyed the camp. And I remember clinging to the side of an old ex-Soviet army van that we were using, being converted into a minibus. And I looked up, and then 15 foot in the air was one of our drivers clinging to the shredded remains of a tent, going round and round and round like
Oh, my
Dorothy in
God.
the Wizard of Oz. And then it was only for a few seconds, and then it had gone, but it totally wrecked the camp. So there wasn't enough time to be scared. It was more being overawed by the experience than being scared.
What advice do you have for inspiring cryptozoologists who want to conduct their own research?
Well, when I was young, I wanted to be a zookeeper. And everybody said, oh, you'll never be a zookeeper. It's too hard to get a job in zoo. So I went out and became a zookeeper. Then I wanted to be a cryptozoologist later. And people said, oh, no, you'll never be a cryptozoologist. So I went out and became a cryptozoologist. I wanted to be an author. People said, oh, you can't hack it as an author. No, I went out and I became an author. My 11th book is due out this year. So my advice is, if you want to do something, don't let anybody else tell you you can't do it. Go and do it. You've got to take the ball. Research is the key. Research is the key for cryptozoology. Choose a cryptid that's likely to exist, that's been seen recently and seen a lot, that's in an area you know you can get to, and get good local guides. That is the big thing. Get good local guides.
Oh, there it is as
Go
well.
out and do it, because the more people we get doing this and doing it well, the closer we are to finding something. And you don't have to be qualified. You don't have to have a string of letters behind your name. As long as you do it scientifically and you do it well and you collect evidence. You don't just go out there and then not write it up. You've got to write down what happens, collect any evidence, and then share it. That's the way forward.
Yeah. If you could prove the existence of one cryptid beyond doubt, which would it be and why?
The Tasmanian wolf, because it's a great icon for conservation. We went over to Tasmania, the Europeans, and we wiped out the Tasmanian emu, which is different from the mainland emu. We hunted the Tasmanian Aborigines like they were rabbits. They actually went beating for them and shot them, and there was a genocide. The Tasmanian Aborigines and their culture were wiped out. The only ones that survived were the ones that integrated into Western culture. And there are people today that still have Tasmanian Aboriginal blood, but there are no purebred Tasmanian Aborigines because we killed them all and destroyed their culture. And we did our best to wipe out the Tasmanian wolf, the thylacine, but it looks like that it's hung on in the remote areas of Tasmania and in the remote areas of New Guinea. So it is a great icon for conservation. And if we could prove it exists and protect it, then we give ourselves a second chance to prove that we can be better, that humans can do something other than destroy and kill. We can put all our minds and our imaginations and our resources into protecting this creature so it can survive into the future.
Yeah. How do you see the field of cryptozoology evolving over the next decade?
I'd like to see more people getting involved in it, doing it in a proper scientific manner. There's a lot of nonsense now in cryptozoology. There's things being included in it that shouldn't, like the Slender Man and the Rake, both of which are completely made up. The Slender Man was a competition to create a urban legend. It never existed. It never had any existence. So the same with the Rake, they're completely made up. These things have been lumped into cryptozoology somehow. No, true cryptozoology has to follow the scientific method. So we need more people doing it, and the thing we need is more funding. If there's been anything that's stopped me and limited what I can do, it's funding. We need more funding for this field. I had a friend called Nick Redfern, and he wrote a hell of a lot of books on UFOs, and he got this eccentric millionaire to pay him to go around looking at all these UFO crash sites. And he said that it all turned out to be nonsense, but he got paid for doing it. He got someone
Amazing.
giving him the funds. Now, if we could get somebody to give us funds, large funds to go and do this,
Yeah.
to pay for these expeditions, because as it stands, I can afford to go out maybe 2 or 3 weeks max into the field. With something like the Yeti or the orangutan or the giant anaconda in South America, you've got to be out there for months and months on end. The snow leopard, you're familiar with an animal called a snow leopard? Well, we know they exist, but no one had ever filmed one until the early 70s. And the BBC went out to film snow leopards, and it took them something like 6 or 7 years to actually get the first film of them in the wild. But now they know how to do it and where to go. They can film them.
Yeah.
You can't just expect to walk out into somewhere and the cryptid to come waltzing up and you
like that, does it?
No. We need the money to conduct more expeditions and longer expeditions.
I've known we're going to Benton. Sometimes you might not see not for 6 months at all. And that's going up 3 times a week or 4 times a week. And then all of a sudden they appear, these lights, orange lights appear in the sky. You think, my God, it's took us all this long for them to come out. And then they'll just disappear another 3 months later. You've got to put the work in.
Yeah, you have. But if you can spend more time in the field, you stand more chance of finding something. Like with the Caspian tiger, we've been after this animal called the Caspian tiger, which is a type of tiger from Central Asia that was supposed to have been hunted into extinction in the 1960s. And we've been over to Tajikistan 3 times now. I've met a park ranger that saw one, and he saw it a month before we were there from a distance of only 100 feet. And we've met hunters and trappers and honey farmers and mullers that have all seen this thing. So we know that it's there. what we'd like to do is set up cameras that are up in the mountains with bait near them and leave them there for like months and months and months. Maybe have them attached to a satellite so we can download images from them to see if we can attract the tiger. Same with the Tasmanian wolf and the orang pendek and things like that. That is the way forward. And also environmental DNA. That's when if an animal walks through an environment, particularly water, they'll leave cells behind, and you can see what's been drinking from a pool or moving through the bush by looking at what cells it leaves behind. And a few years ago, a British vet called Mark Evans took a expedition to Bhutan to look for the Yeti.
Oh, yeah, Mark Evans. Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, and they took environmental DNA samples from a lake in the mountains of Bhutan, and they found that the Marco Polo sheep had been drinking from there. It's a type of giant wild sheep, and they had no idea that there was a population there in Bhutan. But there was. But they also found primate DNA, and it was the DNA from a higher primate, and it shared something like 99 or 98% of its genetic makeup with humans. So it is more closely related to humans than a chimpanzee.
Right.
So we think that was the DNA of the Yeti. And I tried to get hold of a sample of that. There was a French geneticist that went with Mark Evans, and her name was Dr. Eva Bellarmine. And I tracked her down, and she said she doesn't work for the company that's got the samples anymore. They were called, what were they called? Oh, I can't remember now, but there's this French company.
Yeah.
And she said, I don't work for them anymore, but they still have the sample. So I got my French friend to write to this company that got the samples. And they said, we can't give them to you because they don't legally belong to us. So my friend wrote back and said, who is the legal owner of these samples? And they said, oh, well, they've been destroyed now. We had what was almost certainly Yeti DNA, and it's been destroyed.
How terrible is that? Why would you do something like that?
Now, a conspiracy theorist might be thinking, yeah, this is the government. They don't want you to know about Yetis. I think it's more likely that they either ran out of space in the labs and they just chucked it down a drain, not realizing how important it was, or it just got accidentally thrown away. I think that's more likely.
Yeah, more than likely, yeah. Right, we're not far off finishing. What's the funniest or weirdest thing that's ever happened to you on a cryptozoology expedition?
Oh, bloody hell. This is in Britain. This happened in Britain. We went up to an animal sanctuary in Cleveland to investigate animal mutilation. Something had killed a couple of wallabies, and they wanted to know, is this a big cat doing this? And we were helping out the police. And and it was obviously, it wasn't an animal attack. A human had done it with a bladed weapon. And I said to the chief of police, there was a chief of police and a policeman. I said, it seems to have been attacked by a human and cut up. Is there any occult activity around here? And the policeman said, oh, no, not really. And then the policeman said, well, there is that place called Skinning Grove. And I said, what's so bad about Skinning Grove? And she says, oh, well, it's like Royston Vasey from League of Gentlemen. If you drive through it, people will come out their doors and glare at you because you're not local. And they said that everyone up there is inbred. There's loads of incest. And then this is the chief of police said this to me. He said, yeah, it's true. I was here one Sunday afternoon and a bloke come in with his son by the scruff of the neck. And he'd been down the pub. He'd come back from the pub and found his wife and his own son going at it, hammer and tongs. And they couldn't.
My God.
They couldn't work out. They didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with it. And he said the other thing is they're always screwing pigs up there. And he said there's a big pig farm and loads of people have been found giving it to pigs. And he said I talked to the guy that ran the pig farm, and he said I had to sack one of my best workers. And I was sorry to see him go because he was such a hard worker. But he said, He just kept shagging the pig.
Oh my God.
You couldn't make it up.
You couldn't make it up, could you? God. Right. What's next for you? Are you working on another book or expedition?
Yes, I'm working on the sequel to The Highest Strangeness. My last book was The Highest Strangeness, which was about high strangeness, Fortean cases in all areas of Fortean, monsters, ghosts, UFOs, and all sorts of stuff. I'm working on the sequel to that. I've got a big book on man-eating animals coming out this year called Beasts That Prey on Man, which is about all kinds of man-eating creatures. And I'm planning an expedition to the Indonesian island of Flores to look for surviving examples of Homo floresiensis, the little hobbit people that were found a few years back, of the subfossil remains. And there's a very good book by Gregory Forth called Between Ape and Human, and Professor Gregory Forth's an anthropologist, and he's collected sightings of living Homo floresiensis from the far east of the island. So we're hoping to get out there to see if we can find any of them, and maybe another trip back to Tasmania. All
It,
depends on funding.
it must take a lot of organising these trips you do.
They do, yeah, they do. The main thing is funding. That's the big thing.
And I bet you enjoy, once you got it all set up and you enjoy going and getting there, it must be fantastic.
Well, the hard part is getting there. Once you're there, it's not so bad. I mean, I've been in places where they've had terrible droughts. When I was in South America, there was an awful drought, and it was murder out on the savannah because there was no. We weren't in the jungle, we were in the grasslands, so there was no protection from the heat. It was unbelievable. The second time I was in Tajikistan, there was a massive storm, bigger than anyone I've seen in the tropics, and a huge flood, and it killed 21 people. And we were driving back down from the mountains, and it looked like the apocalypse. And there was a bridge out, and they had to repair the bridge, the local people, with their hands, and it took them 3 hours to do it. I can't see anybody in Britain doing it like that.
No.
It was 3 hours to fix this bridge. So you do encounter hardships out there. But the thing that annoys me is getting there, and the bureaucracy and the waiting around and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, like you say, it is. It's getting, I suppose you've got to have permission as well.
Yes, yeah, in some places, like in Sumatra, they've cottoned on to that Western scientists are interested in the orang pendek. So now they charge you a bomb to go into the national park, and even more if you've got cameras. Where in reality, they should be welcoming people in to get the evidence, because that means more people would come there. If we could
Of
prove
course
the
it
orang,
would. Yeah. Yeah.
if you could prove the orang was real,
Yeah. If you
to
can,
get a massive influx of tourism, the rainforest would be, the sun bears, everything could be protected.
yeah. Yeah, you would. Yeah, make it a lot better for everybody. Well, well, thank you, Richard, for coming on the show. It's been very good. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I've loved it today, talking with you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been interesting, that has, talking about, the places you've been around the world is amazing.
There are places I still want to go that I haven't been yet. I really want to go to Japan, and I'd love to go to Siberia if Russia sorts itself out.
Oh, God, yeah.
New Guinea, New
New
Guinea,
Zealand.
where I really,
Oh,
yeah,
Papua New Guinea.
yeah. Scunthorpe, I've never been there.
That's funny. I like it. I like it. Yeah, well, thank you again, Richard, for coming on the show. My guest next Wednesday, that's Wednesday the 21st of January, is Dave Scott. Let's see if I've got any. Dave is an experiencer, someone who has had his first-hand encounter with the unknown. His personal experiences inform his work and added depth and authenticity to his shows. He does a radio show as well. He's a paranormal media influencer, journalist. He's done all sorts as Dave Scott. So that's next Wednesday, 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific, and 7 p.m. in the UK. So thank you again, Richard, for coming on the show. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Bye for now.
If anyone wants to get in touch,
Yes,
the organisation I work with are called the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and the website is www.cfz.org.uk. And me personally, my email is doctor3uk@yahoo.com. And as I say, if there's anybody out there that wants to fund an expedition, or any company, we'll wear your t-shirts, we'll wear your logo. If you want to fund one of our expeditions, we're totally open to that.
And where can people get your books?
You can order them on Amazon or eBay. Just type in Richard Freeman, and anything to do with cryptozoology or Forteana, it'll be me. So you can get them online, and you can order them from bookshops as well.
Right. Yeah, I should imagine you will be able to. Well, thank you again. You take care and have a lovely weekend. Carry on what you're doing.
Cheers, and give my best to Paul Sinclair.
I shall do. I'll probably see him tomorrow.